Would you still rebuild your life if the people who raised you were the ones who tore it down? The wind cuts cold across the open field, carrying the dry scent of dust and old wood, and Ethan Cole stands still for a long moment, staring at what used to be a house. Now nothing more than a leaning skeleton of gray boards and rusted nails, a place no one would choose unless they had nowhere left to go. And maybe that's the point, because nowhere is exactly where he's been since the day his own family signed the papers, shook hands, and quietly erased him from everything that once had his name on it. And beside him, Rex doesn't move. The German shepherd's paws planted firm in the dirt, ears forward, eyes locked on the broken shack like it means something more than what it is, like it remembers something Ethan doesn't. And for a second, Ethan almost laughs under his breath, not because anything is funny, but because it's easier than admitting how close he is to walking away again, from this place, from the past, from the part of himself that still believes anything can be rebuilt. Once it's been taken apart piece by piece, he exhales slowly, the air visible in the early morning chill, somewhere around 40 degrees, the kind of cold that settles into your bones without asking permission, and he shifts his weight, boots pressing into the dry ground as he takes one step forward, then stops, because the shack groans under a passing gust, a long, hollow sound like it's warning him not to get too close, not to expect too much, not to believe in something that's already been left behind. And Rex lets out a low, steady breath, not quite a growl, not quite a whine, just enough to pull Ethan's attention back. The dog steps ahead without waiting, crossing the threshold where the door used to be, tail still, posture calm but certain, like he's been here before, like he knows the way in. And Ethan hesitates at the edge, fingers brushing against the old dog tags hanging beneath his jacket, the metal cool against his skin, a quiet reminder of a life that once had structure, purpose, something solid to stand on. Before everything shifted, before trust became something fragile and easily broken, he closes his eyes for a second, just one, long enough to feel the weight of it all, the silence, the distance, the absence of voices that used to call him family. And when he opens them again, Rex is already inside, standing in the middle of the room where the floorboards sag, and the light slips through cracks in the walls like thin lines of gold, and the dog turns his head, looking back, waiting, not impatient, not demanding, just there. And something about that stillness, that quiet insistence, makes Ethan step forward despite himself. The wood creaks under his weight, dust rising faintly with each movement. The air inside smells like time, like rain that came and went years ago, like something forgotten but not entirely gone. And he takes another step, then another, until he's standing beside the only living thing that hasn't turned its back on him. And for a moment, neither of them move. The world outside fades into nothing but wind and distance, and Ethan swallows hard, voice low, almost lost in the empty space. This is it, huh? He murmurs, not expecting an answer, and Rex shifts slightly, nose lowering toward the floor, inhaling slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something buried beneath the surface, something hidden where no one else thought to look. And Ethan watches, confused at first, then curious, because the dog doesn't stop. He circles once, then again, then pauses at a single spot where the wood dips just a little more than the rest, and the air changes, subtle, but enough, and Ethan feels it before he understands it. That quiet pull, that sense that maybe this place isn't just broken, maybe it's waiting. And Rex taps the floor once with his paw, then looks up, eyes steady, unwavering, as if to say this isn't the end you thought it was. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan doesn't look away. The sound of wood settling under their weight lingers in the air, low and tired, like the shack itself is remembering something it has not spoken in years. And Ethan lowers himself slowly onto one knee, brushing his hand across the warped floorboards where Rex had stopped, the surface rough against his palm, splintered in places, worn down by time and weather and whatever stories this place has carried long before he ever set foot here. And for a moment he does nothing, just listens, because out here silence is never empty. It hums with wind slipping through cracks, with distant trees swaying, with the quiet rhythm of a dog breathing beside you. And Rex remains still, focused, nose hovering just inches above the same spot, as if the scent has not faded, as if it is fresh, recent, important, and Ethan exhales slowly, the doubt still there but softer now, less certain of itself, because something about the way Rex stands, steady and unshaken, feels familiar, like the nights overseas when nothing made sense until the dog reacted first, and he trusted that instinct more than anything else, even more than his own, and that memory settles into his chest like a weight he recognizes, not heavy, just real, and he shifts closer, tapping the wood lightly with his knuckles. Once, then again, the sound dull at first, then slightly hollow, just enough to notice, just enough to make him pause, and his eyes narrow as he leans in, pressing his ear closer to the floor, listening for something beneath, something hidden, but all he hears is the faint echo of his own movement, and still, it is different, subtle, but not nothing, and Rex lets out a quiet breath, then scratches once, not aggressively, not urgently, just a single deliberate motion, like he is pointing rather than digging, and Ethan studies that spot again, the grain of the wood, the way it dips just slightly lower than the rest, the way the nails around it are older, darker, and he runs his fingers along the edges, feeling the uneven seam, the small gap where two boards do not quite meet anymore, and something shifts inside him, not excitement, not yet, but a quiet awareness that this place might hold more than just decay. And he sits back for a second, rubbing his hands together to warm them, the cold creeping in through his sleeves, settling into his bones. And he glances around the shack again, really looking this time, at the walls that lean but have not fallen, at the beams that still hold despite years of neglect, at the light that finds its way in through every crack, as if refusing to let the darkness claim it completely. And he lets out a slow breath, longer this time, steadier, as if something inside him is adjusting, recalibrating, and Rex finally relaxes his stance just a little, lowering himself to the ground beside that same spot, not leaving it, just guarding it in his own quiet way, and Ethan cannot help but shake his head slightly, a faint, almost invisible smile pulling at the corner of his mouth, because for the first time since he arrived, he does not feel like he is standing at the end of something. He feels like he is standing at the edge of a question, and questions mean there is still something left to discover. And he reaches down, resting his hand briefly on Rex's neck, fingers sinking into the thick fur, feeling the warmth there, the steady presence, and he murmurs under his breath, softer than before, "You see something I do not, do you?" And Rex does not respond with movement or sound, just a calm, unwavering stillness that somehow says more than anything else could, and Ethan nods once, almost to himself, before pushing back up to his feet, the decision not fully formed but already taking shape, because leaving now would mean never knowing, and staying means facing whatever this place holds, whether it is nothing or something that changes everything. And he looks down at the worn floor one more time, then around the broken walls, and finally out through the open doorway where the wind continues to move across the empty land. And for the first time since he stepped onto this property, he does not think about what he lost. He thinks about what might still be here, waiting just beneath the surface. The decision settles quietly, not like a sudden spark, but like a slow, steady weight finding its place, and Ethan moves with it, stepping back out into the cold morning air where the sky stretches pale and endless above him. The kind of sky that makes a man feel both small and strangely free at the same time. And he stands there for a moment with his hands on his hips, looking at the shack from the outside now, really looking, not as something broken, but as something unfinished, and the wind pushes against his jacket, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and distant pine, and Rex follows him out, stopping at his side, his gaze still flicking back toward the doorway, as if the answer they need is still inside, waiting, patient, and Ethan exhales slowly, longer this time, and nods once, not to the dog, not even to himself, but to the choice he is making without saying it out loud, because some decisions do not need words, they just need the first step. And he turns, scanning the property, the uneven ground, the scattered debris, the remnants of something that once stood stronger than this, and he starts walking, boots crunching over gravel and dry twigs, eyes searching for anything useful, anything that can be saved, because if he is going to stay, then staying means work, and work means rebuilding, not just the shack, but something inside himself that has been left idle for too long, and Rex moves ahead of him again, weaving through the open space with purpose, nose low, tail steady, and Ethan watches him for a second, a faint sense of familiarity settling in, because this is how it used to be, not following orders, but following instinct, trusting movement over thought, and he lets that guide him now. Picking up a loose plank here, testing a rusted hinge there, stacking what little he can salvage into a small pile near the front of the shack, and time begins to shift, not in hours or minutes, but in actions, in the rhythm of lifting, placing, adjusting, and the cold starts to ease just enough under the effort, his breath steadying, his hands warming despite the rough wood and splinters. And for the first time in a long while, he feels something close to focus, the kind that quiets everything else, the kind that leaves no room for regret or memory, only the task in front of him. And Rex returns to the doorway again, pausing, looking back, then stepping inside as if reminding him that the real reason they are here is not outside, but beneath that floor. And Ethan straightens, wiping his hands against his jeans, and follows, stepping carefully back into the dim light of the shack where the air still holds that same quiet tension, that same sense of something unfinished. And he walks directly to the spot where Rex had been earlier. No hesitation this time, no second guessing, just a calm, deliberate movement. And he crouches again, running his fingers along the seam between the boards, pressing a little harder now, testing the give, and there it is again, that hollow shift, clearer this time, undeniable. And he leans back slightly, glancing around for something to pry with, spotting an old metal rod leaning against the wall, half buried in dust, and he reaches for it, the cold weight of it settling into his hand like a tool that has been waiting for use. And Rex steps closer, standing just beside him, not interfering, not rushing, just present. And Ethan positions the rod at the edge of the loose board, hesitating for just a fraction of a second, not from fear, but from the understanding that whatever lies beneath is about to change everything, or nothing at all, and both possibilities carry their own kind of weight. And he draws in a slow breath, steady and controlled, then presses down, the wood resisting at first, creaking softly, then giving just enough to let the edge lift, a thin line of darkness appearing beneath, and the sound echoes slightly through the empty space, sharper than anything before. And Ethan pauses, holding the position, eyes fixed on that narrow opening, while Rex leans in just slightly, his ears forward, his focus absolute, as if this moment matters more than anything else they have done so far. And the air seems to still around them, the wind outside fading into the background, leaving only the quiet creak of old wood and the steady rhythm of two living beings standing at the edge of something hidden, something waiting just beneath the surface, ready to be seen. The wood gives a little more under the pressure, not breaking, just yielding, like it has been waiting for someone to ask the right question. And Ethan adjusts his grip on the metal rod, pushing again, slower this time, controlled, the kind of movement learned from years of doing things that could not be rushed. And the board lifts another inch, then another, the nails protesting softly as they loosen from their hold. And a deeper shadow opens beneath, cool and still, carrying a faint scent that does not belong to rot or dust, something older, something sealed away. And Ethan pauses, holding the board halfway raised, his breath steady but his chest tightening just slightly, not from fear, but from that quiet instinct that tells him this moment matters. And beside him Rex shifts his weight forward, nose lowering toward the opening, inhaling carefully. Not excited, not alarmed, just certain. And that certainty settles into Ethan more than anything else, grounding him, reminding him that whatever this is, they found it together. And he exhales once, then sets the rod aside and reaches down with both hands, fingers curling under the edge of the board, lifting it fully now, the wood coming free with a dry, tired sound. And he leans it carefully against the wall, exposing a small, shallow cavity beneath the floor, no more than a foot deep, lined with packed earth that looks undisturbed except for one thing, a rectangular shape, half buried, edges just visible through the dirt. And Ethan does not move right away. He just looks at it, eyes narrowing slightly as his mind tries to make sense of what he is seeing, because it is too deliberate to be random, too clean to be natural. And Rex lets out a soft breath, almost a whisper, then lowers himself beside the opening, watching, waiting. And Ethan slowly reaches down, brushing away the loose soil with his hand. Careful, deliberate, uncovering more of the shape inch by inch, the texture beneath his fingers changing from dirt to something solid, smooth in places, rough in others. And as more of it is revealed, it becomes clear, a metal box, old but intact, its surface worn and darkened with age, but still holding its form like it was meant to last. And Ethan sits back on his heels for a moment, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the opening, the weight of the discovery settling in, not as excitement, not as relief, but as something quieter, something deeper, because this is not just a hidden object. It is a message left behind, a choice made by someone who stood in this same space long before him, someone who decided that whatever was inside needed to be protected, hidden, saved. And the thought lingers, stretching across time, connecting two moments that were never meant to meet. And Ethan swallows slowly, his gaze shifting briefly to Rex, who meets it. Without hesitation, steady, unwavering. And there is no doubt there, no question, just presence. And Ethan nods once, almost imperceptibly, before leaning forward again, sliding his fingers along the edges of the box, testing its weight, finding the best way to lift it without forcing anything. And when he finally pulls it free from the earth, it comes up heavier than he expected, solid, grounded, real, and he sets it carefully on the floor beside the opening, brushing off the remaining dirt with the sleeve of his jacket, revealing faint markings along the top, worn but not erased, lines and symbols that hint at purpose, at ownership, at a story that has not yet been told. And he runs his thumb across them slowly, feeling the grooves, tracing the shape of something left behind with intention. And the air inside the shack feels different now, not warmer, not lighter, just changed, as if the space itself recognizes what has been uncovered. And Ethan leans back slightly, resting his hands on his knees, eyes fixed on the box. And for a moment he does nothing. He does not open it. He does not speak. He simply sits there, allowing the silence to settle again. But it is no longer the same silence as before. It carries weight now, meaning, possibility. And Rex shifts closer, lying down beside the box. Not guarding it, not claiming it, just staying near, as if whatever is inside belongs to both of them in a way that cannot be explained. And Ethan finally lets out a quiet breath, his voice low, almost lost in the stillness. All right, he murmurs, not to the box, not even to the dog, but to the moment itself, because some things are not found by accident. And some places are not empty just because they look that way. And as his hand moves toward the lid, he knows without needing to say it, that this is the point where everything begins to shift, whether he is ready or not. His hand stops just short of the lid, hovering there as if the space between touch and action holds more weight than the object itself. And Ethan feels it, that quiet hesitation, not fear, not doubt, but something closer to respect. Because whatever is inside this box has waited longer than he has been searching, longer than he has been lost. And for a moment, he lets his hand rest there without moving, fingers brushing lightly against the cold metal, tracing the edge where the lid meets the base, feeling the slight resistance of time pressed into it. And beside him Rex remains still, his presence steady and grounding, his breathing slow. And even, as if reminding Ethan that there is no rush, that whatever truth waits inside will not disappear if given one more second. And Ethan inhales deeply, the air cool and dry in his lungs, then exhales just as slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders. And with that quiet release, he finally moves, gripping the edge of the lid and lifting gently, testing it first, expecting resistance. But the metal shifts with a soft, worn sound, not locked, not sealed, just closed, as if whoever placed it here intended it to be found one day. And the lid opens inch by inch, revealing darkness at first, then shapes as the light from above filters in, soft and pale, touching what lies inside without fully exposing it. And Ethan leans closer, his eyes adjusting, his focus narrowing, and what he sees does not strike him all at once. It unfolds, piece by piece, like a memory returning slowly instead of a surprise arriving suddenly. There are papers, carefully folded, edges yellowed but preserved, bound together with a thin cord that is held despite the years, and beneath them, something heavier, something wrapped in cloth, dark and worn but intact, and Ethan does not reach for it yet. He starts with the papers, sliding them free with careful hands, the texture fragile but not crumbling, and he unties the cords slowly, deliberately, as if aware that whatever is written there was meant to be read with patience, not haste. And as the pages unfold, the faint scent of old ink and time rises subtly, and his eyes move across the first lines, scanning, then stopping, because the words are not random. They are structured, intentional, written in a steady hand that carries both discipline and weight. And though the names mean nothing to him at first glance, the tone does. It is familiar in a way that reaches deeper than recognition. Something in the phrasing, in the way the sentences carry both instruction and reflection. And Ethan's expression shifts slightly, not surprise, not confusion, but a quiet focus that pulls him in further, and Rex shifts closer, his head resting lightly against Ethan's leg, not interrupting, just present, as if sharing in the moment without needing to understand it. And Ethan continues reading, the outside world fading into nothing more than distant wind and shifting light, the shack no longer just a broken structure, but a space holding something preserved, something chosen to remain hidden until now. And as he turns the page, a small detail catches his eye, a familiar insignia, faint but unmistakable, worn into the corner of the paper, and his breath pauses for just a fraction of a second, because that symbol does not belong to strangers. It belongs to a history he knows, to a lineage of service, of men who carried more than just their own lives. And he leans back slightly, the paper still in his hands, his mind connecting pieces that were never meant to meet. And for the first time since opening the box, the silence around him feels heavier, not empty, but full, layered with meaning that has not yet been fully uncovered. And he lowers the papers carefully beside him, his gaze shifting to the cloth-wrapped object still resting at the bottom of the box, and his hand moves toward it slowly, almost cautiously now, because whatever lies beneath is no longer just hidden. It is connected, and connections carry consequences. And he unwraps the cloth with steady fingers, revealing something that catches the light differently, something that holds its shape and presence in a way that demands attention without asking for it. And Ethan does not speak. He does not react outwardly, but something inside him shifts again, deeper this time, more certain, because this is no longer about finding something valuable. It is about understanding why it was left. And as Rex lifts his head slightly, eyes steady, watching not the object but Ethan himself, it becomes clear that this moment is not about what was buried, but about what is about to be uncovered in him. The object rests in his hands heavier than its size should allow, not because of weight alone, but because of what it represents, and Ethan turns it slowly, letting the light catch along its edges, revealing the worn surface of what is unmistakably an old military case. Compact, reinforced, built not for display but for endurance, and his fingers trace along the latch, feeling the subtle indentation where it has been opened and closed countless times before it was ever placed beneath this floor. And he pauses again, not out of uncertainty, but because something in him recognizes the pattern, the intention behind it, and when he finally presses the latch, it gives with a soft click, clean and precise despite the years, and the lid opens smoothly, revealing what lies inside with a quiet clarity that settles into the room. There is no chaos, no clutter. Everything is placed with purpose, aligned, preserved, and at the center rests a set of dog tags, the metal dulled but intact, the chain coiled carefully as if it had been handled with care even in its final moment. And Ethan's breath slows as his eyes settle on them, not just seeing, but reading, because names carry weight. And as he leans closer, the letters come into focus, etched deep enough to survive time. And for a second, just one, his mind does not accept it, because the name there is not unfamiliar, it is not distant, it is connected, tied to something he has heard before in fragments, in passing, in stories that never seemed personal until now. And his hand tightens slightly around the edge of the case, not in shock, but in recognition that arrives quietly and stays. And beside the tags are photographs, small, faded, but preserved, images of a man standing beside a structure that looks almost identical to the shack around him, younger, stronger, with a German shepherd at his side, posture steady, eyes forward, and Ethan studies the image longer than he expects to, because there is something in the way the man stands, something familiar in the stillness, in the presence, and Rex shifts closer, his nose brushing lightly against the edge of the open case, not touching the items, just acknowledging them, as if understanding without needing explanation. And Ethan exhales slowly, setting the case down carefully on the floor, his movements deliberate, respectful, and he reaches for the papers again, flipping through them with more intention now, searching, connecting, and the words begin to align in a way they did not before. Dates, locations, notes written in a hand that reflects both discipline and reflection. And then there it is, a name repeated, a place tied to it, a timeline that stretches forward into something Ethan knows all too well. And he leans back slightly, the pieces settling into place, not all at once, but enough to form a picture that was never meant to be obvious. Because this is not just a hidden box, not just a forgotten story, it is a thread, one that leads directly into his own past in a way he never expected. And the realization does not come with noise or drama, it comes with stillness, with a quiet shift in how he sees everything around him, the shack, the land, even the choice to come here. And he glances around the room again, but it no longer feels empty or abandoned, it feels intentional, as if it has been holding this moment, waiting for someone who could understand it. And Rex settles beside him, lowering himself. Fully now, his body relaxed but present, a silent anchor in a space that has changed without moving. And Ethan runs a hand slowly over his face, not out of exhaustion, but to steady himself, to ground the realization that is beginning to take shape. And when he looks back down at the case, at the tags, at the photographs, there is no longer any question that this place is more than what it appeared to be. It is part of something that did not end when it was buried, something that has now been uncovered not by chance, but by a path that led him here step by step. And as the wind outside brushes against the walls once more, softer now, almost distant, Ethan understands without needing to say it that whatever he does next will not just rebuild a structure. It will uncover a truth that has been waiting far longer than he has been searching. The realization does not rush him. It settles slowly, like dust finding its place after years of stillness. And Ethan remains seated on the worn floor, the open case in front of him, the papers spread beside it. And his mind begins to trace the connections more clearly now, not as scattered thoughts, but as something structured, something deliberate. And he lifts one of the photographs again, holding it closer to the light, studying the man's face more carefully this time. The lines, the posture, the quiet confidence in the way he stands beside the same kind of structure Ethan now occupies. And there is something in that expression, something familiar in a way that is not visual, but deeper, something that echoes through memory rather than sight. And Ethan exhales slowly, lowering the photo just slightly as the understanding continues to take shape. Because this is not coincidence, this is not chance. This is a path that was laid long before he ever stepped onto this land. And Rex shifts beside him, rising to his feet, his ears tilting toward the open doorway, as if catching something beyond the walls. And Ethan follows that movement instinctively, glancing toward the light outside, where the wind carries a different tone now, not louder, not stronger, just different. And he listens for a second, then looks back down at the papers in his hand, and something in him tightens, not with fear, but with clarity, because the dates, the names, the locations, they align with a history he knows, a history he has been part of, even if he never knew the beginning of it. And he sets the photograph down carefully, his hand lingering for just a moment longer than necessary, before reaching for another page, flipping it over, scanning the words again, slower this time, more deliberate. And there it is, written not as a report, not as a record, but as a message, something meant to be understood by someone who would come after. And Ethan's jaw tightens slightly as he reads, not out of tension, but out of recognition, because the voice in those words feels familiar in a way that does not need explanation. And Rex steps toward the doorway now, pausing at the threshold, his body still but alert, as if acknowledging that whatever is happening inside this room is no longer contained within it. And Ethan closes his eyes for just a second, holding the paper loosely in his hand, letting the meaning settle fully, because this is not just about what was left behind. It is about why it was left, and why it was found now, by him, and no one else. And when he opens his eyes again, The room feels smaller, not physically, but in the way that everything inside it now points towards something larger beyond it. And he rises slowly to his feet, the movement steady, grounded, as if he is carrying more than just his own weight now, and he walks toward the doorway, stopping beside Rex, looking out across the land that stretches wide and quiet under the pale sky. And for the first time since arriving, he does not see it as empty. He sees it as connected, every inch of it holding a piece of something that has been building long before he understood it. And Rex steps forward onto the dirt, then stops, turning his head back just slightly, not calling, not urging, just acknowledging. And Ethan follows, stepping out into the open air again, the cold brushing against his face, sharper now, clearer. And he looks back once at the shack, the broken boards, the leaning frame, the place that no one else would have chosen. And he understands now that it was never about the structure itself. It was about what it carried, what it protected, what it waited to reveal. And as he stands there, the papers still in his hand, the weight of the case still fresh in his memory, he feels something shift inside him again. Not uncertainty, not hesitation, but direction, quiet and firm. And in the distance, the land stretches out beyond what he can see. And for the first time, he does not feel like he has nowhere to go. He feels like he has somewhere to begin. And Rex moves ahead a few steps, then stops. Again, looking back once more, and Ethan gives a small nod, almost imperceptible, before taking that next step forward, not away from the past, but directly into what it has been leading him toward all along. The air feels different once he steps forward, not warmer, not easier, but clearer, like something unseen has finally shifted into place. And Ethan walks slowly across the uneven ground, each step deliberate, each breath steady. The papers still held in his hand, but no longer just words on a page. Now they carry direction, and Rex moves a few yards ahead, his pace unhurried, nose low, tracing a path that does not exist to the eye, but feels certain all the same. And Ethan watches him for a moment before following, not questioning, not resisting, just trusting in that quiet instinct that has guided them before. And the land stretches wide around them, dry grass brushing against his boots, the faint sound of wind moving through it like a whisper that never quite forms into words. And he glances back once toward the shack, smaller now in the distance, but no longer broken in his mind, just waiting, holding its place as something that will be returned to, rebuilt not out of desperation but out of purpose. And he turns forward again, focusing on the direction Rex has chosen, and the path leads them toward a slight rise in the land. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle slope that lifts the horizon by a few feet. And as they climb it, the ground becomes firmer, less scattered, more defined. And Ethan slows slightly, his eyes scanning the area more carefully now, because something about this place feels intentional, not marked, not obvious, but chosen. And Rex stops near the top, standing still, ears forward, gaze fixed on a spot just ahead. And Ethan steps up beside him, following that line of sight. And at first he sees nothing but earth and grass, but then the details begin to separate, a subtle difference in texture, a faint outline where the soil has been disturbed long ago and settled again over time. And Ethan crouches down slowly, his fingers brushing across the surface, feeling the slight change beneath, the same kind of quiet signal they had found inside the shack. And his breath deepens just a little, not from effort, but from recognition, because whatever this is, it connects, it continues, it does not end where he thought it would. And he sets the papers down carefully beside him, pressing his palm into the ground, testing it. And Rex lowers himself nearby, watching, not interfering, just present, as he always is. And Ethan begins to clear away the top layer of soil, not digging, just uncovering, brushing aside the loose earth inch by inch, revealing what lies beneath with patience rather than force. And as the surface gives way, something solid appears again, not metal this time, but stone, flat and deliberate, placed rather than formed. And Ethan pauses, his hand resting against it, the cool surface grounding him in the moment. And he exhales slowly, his gaze lifting briefly to the horizon before returning to the stone, because this is no longer just discovery, it is confirmation. And he shifts his weight, clearing more of the edges, revealing the full shape, a marker of some kind, not large, not decorated, but intentional, and he runs his fingers along its surface, feeling the faint grooves that suggest something carved, something worn down by time, but not erased completely. And his chest tightens slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding that continues to build with each piece uncovered. And Rex inches closer, his head lowering, his presence steady, and Ethan leans in just enough to make out the faint markings, his eyes narrowing as he traces them slowly, letter by letter, shape by shape, until meaning begins to form. And the moment it does, he stills completely, his hand resting flat against the stone, his breath held for just a fraction of a second longer than before, because this is not just another clue. This is something final, something that ties everything together in a way he cannot ignore. And he sits back slowly, the ground firm beneath him, the sky wide above him, and the silence that settles now is not empty. It is full, carrying the weight of what has been revealed and what it demands in return. And Ethan closes his eyes briefly, just long enough to let that truth settle fully, before opening them again, his gaze steady, his direction no longer uncertain, because whatever this place holds, whatever it asks of him, he understands now that he was never meant to walk away from it. The wind moves softer now, carrying a quiet steadiness across the open land, and Ethan remains seated beside the stone, his hand still resting lightly against its surface, not holding on, just acknowledging. And the meaning of it all no longer presses on him with weight. It settles into him with clarity, the kind that does not demand action, only understanding. And Rex shifts closer, lowering himself beside Ethan, his body warm against the cold ground, his presence constant in a way that requires nothing and gives everything. And for a long moment neither of them move, the world around them continuing without interruption, the sky stretching wide above, the grass bending gently with each passing breeze. And Ethan exhales slowly, longer than before, as if something inside him has finally found its place. And he lifts his hand from the stone, brushing the dust from his fingers, not to remove it, but to feel it, to remind himself that this is real, that what he has uncovered is not just a story left behind. It is something entrusted, something carried forward. And he reaches for the papers again, unfolding them one last time, his eyes moving across the words not to search, but to confirm. And this time there is no hesitation, no uncertainty, only recognition, because the message is no longer hidden. It is clear in a way that does not need explanation, and he folds them carefully, placing them inside his jacket, close, not as something to protect, but as something to carry. And he rises slowly to his feet, the movement steady, grounded. And when he looks out across the land again, it is no longer unfamiliar, it is no longer empty. It feels like something that has been waiting, not for anyone, but for the right moment. And Rex stands with him, shaking the dust lightly from his coat before looking up, his eyes calm, watchful. And Ethan gives a small nod, not as a command, not as a signal, but as an agreement. And together they begin to walk back toward the shack, the distance between them and the structure closing step by step, not with urgency, but with purpose. And as they approach, the broken boards, the leaning frame, the weathered edges no longer seem like signs of failure. They look like beginnings, like something that has endured long enough to be rebuilt. And Ethan steps inside once more, the light falling through the cracks just as it had before, but it feels different now, warmer somehow, not in temperature, but in meaning. And he moves to the center of the room, looking down at the open space where the box had been, then around at the walls that still stand. And he sets his shoulders slightly, not in strain, but in quiet resolve, because this is no longer a place he found, it is a place he chooses. And Rex circles once before settling near the doorway, his body relaxed, his watch steady. And Ethan reaches for the loose boards, lifting one, then another, placing them carefully, not rushing, not forcing, just beginning. And the sound of wood meeting wood echoes softly through the space, not as a repair, but as a promise. And outside the wind continues its steady path across the land, unchanged, unconcerned. But inside, something has shifted in a way that will not be undone. And Ethan pauses for a moment, resting his hand against the frame, his gaze drifting toward the horizon visible through the doorway. And he breathes in deeply, then lets it out, the quiet rhythm of it matching the stillness around him. And he speaks softly, almost to himself, almost to the dog. We will build it right. This time. And Rex lifts his head slightly, not responding, but present. And that is enough. Because some answers are not spoken, they are lived. And as the light continues to move slowly across the floor, touching the space where something once lay hidden, now revealed, now carried forward, the work begins, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet, steady way that lasting things are always built.